Hello, I'm so excited to have Cassie with me. Cassie is a client of mine and a friend. We've been working together for about 6 weeks now, and it's been incredible. So Cassie's journey, I can't wait for y'all to get to know her. She went from really feeling just like she was exhausted with her relationship with food. Like so many of the women I speak with, they had tried basically every diet. And like I said, like Cassie, you're going to be telling so many women's stories. Just, I think so many people are going to identify with what you went through with your relationship with food, like really trying to diet and get it right and count and track, and then feeling like you couldn't sustain that. So then you end up binge eating. And it's just like, these are not conversations that enough of us are having. So I'm so glad that you are brave enough to open up about it, because so many people are going to resonate with that feeling of just like being at war with food and not feeling like you have peace with food. And then to see where you are now, which is just like total freedom and flexibility with food and like confidence and empowerment. It's been incredible to see you get to this point. So thank you for being here. Do you want to like introduce yourself and just tell us kind of who you are, where you are, what you do, anything that you want us to know?
Yeah, so my name's Cassie Helsinski. I am from Erie, PA, and Marie and I went to high school together. And I work at Erie Insurance. I'm a project manager. I've been with the company for 7.5 years now. Love what I do. I have a 13-month-old baby boy. His name's Noah. And honestly, like, he is probably one of the biggest reasons why I started this process in the first place. And we'll get into more of that. But yeah, I've been married for almost 3 years now. And my husband also went to the same high school that Marie and I did, but we didn't know each other in high school. But yeah, so that's a little bit about me. And I'm excited to talk to you guys.
Yeah, thank you, Cassie. So we weren't really in touch like post high school. I think that maybe you had just seen some things on Facebook and you were like, oh, that sounds interesting. I think I need help with this. So maybe you can tell us like what you had tried before, what kind of diets you had tried, and then how did you get to this point where you were like, I think I need support. Like, I think that I could use help with my relationship with food. So what are some of those things? I know that you mentioned, like, even in your application before we spoke, you went to a dietitian and you had tried calorie counting, but can you tell us like specifically what diets you did and what kind of things you tried with your relationship with food?
Yeah, so a couple of years ago, probably almost like 3 or 4 years now, I kind of came to the realization, I was recently engaged, and so everyone starts talking about like sweating before the wedding and things like that. And took a step back and realized, I just like was not happy with where I was in life. Like, it was pretty unhealthy. I mean, I don't think I ever ate anything that felt good to my body. Like, I never really paid attention to like nutrient dense foods. Like, I just didn't really care, to be honest, and not in a good way. Like, there's a difference between like food freedom and just like not really caring about your physical health.
Yes.
And so got to a point where, I was like, I need to make a change. I want to be healthy. And a lot of that came from, yes, the wedding, but also the fact that I knew someday my husband and I would want to have a kid and wanted to be as healthy as possible for that future child that I now have. So the very first thing that I ended up doing was the Arbonne Full 30 days. It's like a healthy eating program that Arbonne has. And, I saw results, as most people do when they go on different diets or different trends. But that process that I went through is really probably the start of, not having a good relationship with food, because through that program, they talk about certain fruits being on and off limits, like certain foods were allowed and certain foods were not. And I think that's really where it started. After I completed that program, I kind of just continued that trend, eating the foods that were approved and the foods that were not. And that continued for quite some time. And then after we got married, still healthy living, like, wanted to do that healthy living process, and then got to a point where I wanted to start seeing a dietitian because I felt like there were food groups missing, or felt like there were nutrient dense foods that were missing in my diet. And through that, they kind of gave me a target calorie goal of what you were supposed to eat and how many portions of certain foods that you should add into your day to day. And I mean, that worked, but still to a certain extent, there's restriction, right? Like, you're only, like, I took it to the point, that perfectionist mentality of I can only have 3 servings of fruits in a day. So even if I wanted a 4th serving of fruit, like, oh no, I can't, that's against the plan. And the rigidity of that plan was just not okay. And then I got pregnant, and pregnancy was fine. Like, I didn't really have any issues there because I was still eating healthy but enjoyed myself through pregnancy. And that's the interesting part of it, is that during pregnancy I probably didn't really follow a diet and just kind of lived my life on while I was pregnant, and it was fine. Everything was fine while I was pregnant and had my son. And of course, after you have a baby, everyone talks about, bouncing back. Everyone talks about body dysmorphia and things like that. And so I started going through portion control. And again, the rigidity of you can only have so many portions of certain foods in a day. Like, what I was doing, you could only have like 1 condiment, so like 1 serving of a dressing. And it was just like eating the most plain, boring foods that you could possibly imagine. It was just not fun for anybody. And as my son started to get older and started to eat table food, this is when I started to really realize that I needed to make a change, because 1, everything that I was eating was boring. What kid is ever going to want to eat completely boring food? Chicken with nothing on it, vegetables with nothing on it. Like, not fun, not sustainable for anybody. But then also my husband doesn't enjoy eating like that, and rightfully so. No normal person really would want to eat like that and be like, yes, plain chicken. And so we started to have a conversation where my husband was like, I'm all for eating vegetables, but like, I'm not going to eat like plain green beans with nothing on them. And it got to a point where it was exhausting thinking about cooking like 3 separate things for dinner every day. And it got exhausting spending time thinking about meal plans. When somebody wants to get together, whether it's a family get together or friends want to get together, it's exhausting thinking about how those certain things fit in your meal plan. Or if my husband wants to try a recipe for dinner, trying to figure out how that fits into the meal plan or how to compensate for that throughout the day. And like, that's just mentally exhausting, trying to constantly have to think about that. And so it got to a point where I didn't want to model that type of behavior of restriction and always being concerned with bouncing back or things like that. I didn't want to model that behavior for my son. And I said, you know what, no, we got to make a change. I want to feel good. I want to feel healthy, but I do not want to restrict myself. I don't want to be that person that's bringing my own meals to a family gathering, or my parents would cook, a turkey burger, a plain turkey burger for me while everyone else was enjoying something else for dinner. Like, to me, that just wasn't sustainable anymore. And I needed mental capacity back. I'm a full-time working mom. I need brain space back. I need to be able to do other things with my free time. So that's kind of what prompted me. Maria, I know you do a lot of promoting on Facebook, and the fact that I knew you and, had that trust with you probably made it easier for me to kind of pull the trigger per se and reach out to say like, hey, I've seen what you've done. I've seen so much on social media in general about intuitive eating. And that's when I was like, okay, I need to look into this. I need to know more about what intuitive eating is. And so that's kind of what prompted me to reach out. Maria gave me some information into what she does. We got on a quick call and talked about, you know, my story, where I'm at, and, you know, that's kind of where we realized it would be a good thing to do to work together. And from there, we've just started working on, you know, why restriction isn't the answer, why diets aren't the answer. And when you come off the surface level, that's when you really realize, you know, yeah, diets don't work. They don't. And yeah, you might see results from diets like I did, and I've sustained my results, but at what cost, I guess, is the answer. That, or what I would propose back is, at what cost have I been able to sustain whatever results I've gained? It's at what cost?
Yeah, that's such a good question. Thank you for sharing all that, Cassie. You're telling my story. You're telling so many women's stories. I mean, I went through the same thing of restriction and following meal plans and counting and tracking. And it is a full-time job. And when you are a mom, that is a full-time job. And when you have a full-time job, that's a second full-time job. And then when you're dieting, that's a third full-time job. Like there's just not enough hours in the day. And like you said, it took up so much brain space, so much planning. And I'm always like very interested in the overlap between between OCD, obsessive compulsive disorder, and dieting behaviors, because there's so much overlap. And the way we've been taught to relate to food is actually like obsessive and harmful and not healthy, and it's disordered. But the most insidious part about dieting and diet culture is it's marketed as like health. Like you do this in order to get healthy and to be well. But it's those behaviors that are marketed as health that actually like aren't healthy at all. Like having to restrict and be rigid around food and be obsessive and counting and tracking, like it's not good for you. And what ends up happening is you have a severely limited menu. You're eating things like plain chicken. So not only are you suffering nutritionally because you're cutting out foods and food groups, but your quality of life is shrinking. Your quality of life is shrinking. You're no longer participating. You're not taking pleasure in food. Pleasure in food is a need. It's an emotional need. And I don't think we validate that enough. If we were to just eat solely based off physical needs, then sure, we could do calories in, calories out, like we would eat like robots, but it's like, that's not what it's like to be a human being. We need satisfaction and pleasure. And that's one of the main reasons why dieting ends up being unsustainable from a food psychology perspective, is like your brain cannot handle being told, no, you cannot have the foods that you like, or no, you cannot have the foods that you need. Like carbs. And so your brain will be like, we'll start to rebel. You'll see rebellious eating, you'll see binge eating, but then also just like biologically, the body can't sustain dieting. And that's like, this was a mind-blowing thing for me to learn personally when I was healing my relationship with food years ago, was like, binge eating is often just a biological response to food restriction. Like the body's finally like, thank you for feeding me. Let's get in as much food as we possibly can right now, because there's this threat of food scarcity. The body's like, there's food scarcity. Like there's not enough food around, which is so sad to me, because there are people in this world with legitimate food scarcity who would give anything to have the access to food that we have, and yet we voluntarily place ourselves in an environment of food scarcity.
Yeah.
Drives me mad.
I mean, I would say too that like when you remove that restriction and you stop, you know, thinking of these foods as good or bad, or, you know, healthy or not healthy, like those foods become like less appealing. And maybe less appealing isn't the right term, but like once you remove that restriction and realize that, yeah, if that's what you want at that point in time, if you want peanut butter pizza, whatever it is, if you want that at that time, if you don't have a meal plan to follow, like it becomes less appealing over time. Like a lot of people think that, you know, if they don't have a meal plan, they'll just eat whatever and, you know, feel like crap. But if you tell yourself that you can have peanut butter, you can have carbs literally whenever you want, and you remove that restrictive mindset away, you don't worry about it as much. Like you just don't find yourself thinking of that food as like the holy grail anymore. It's just there.
Yes.
That's like the minute you remove that restriction from it, that food takes on a whole new meaning in your life, and it's not a restrictive food anymore. So it's just a fact of life, you know?
Spot on. Yeah. And that principle of like giving yourself permission instead of restriction, it does work in such a way that it takes those magical foods off a pedestal so that they'll still appeal to you, like you'll still like them, but they will no longer have power over you. And I've seen this in my clients over and over and over again. But even if I hadn't seen it work in my clients, there's so much research behind this. And the research shows that with permission around food, people learn how to self-regulate. It's not you don't see loss of control eating like you see with dieting, because you're like, oh, if I could have this anytime I want it, then I'm not going to eat it all right now with urgency. So then we see less instances of binge eating. But that's one thing that I wish more people knew. Cassie, this is why you've been such a joy to work with. Intuitive eating is an evidence-based model, and it's been around for 25 years. There's research and science behind it. And it's been exciting to work with you because you've been working through some of these materials, some of the literature, and applying these principles, and you've been able to see how much research there is and how cool it is that like this has been studied and validated and peer reviewed. So it's like intuitive eating sounds like woo-woo if you don't know, if you have no context. Yeah.
That's like the biggest thing I was going to add too, is like for me, the very first time I heard about intuitive eating, I was like, okay, it just kind of sounds like a made up thing.
Yeah.
Like, it just sounds very like airy because it's like, oh, you just eat whatever you want. Like it doesn't feel as concrete until you actually learn a lot about it. And there's so much science, there's so much research behind it that you cannot beat like the value that you learn through intuitive eating. And it's like, no, the people that are the healthiest, if health is your main goal, like it was for me, one of my main goals when I came to Marie, I said, look, I enjoy feeling healthy. I like feeling good. Before I started dieting, like I was not my best self. I had very low energy. Like I just didn't feel good because I didn't care about what I put into my body. And I told Maria that was very important to me. I still wanted to feel good. I still wanted to eat foods that made me feel good. But what I wanted was the freedom to do a date night with my husband, the freedom to do family parties and not have to be the girl that brings her own food or asks her mom to set aside something special for me. Like I want to enjoy everything, you know, and not have to feel bad about it. I want to not have to worry about how it fits into my diet. And it's so important that like intuitive eating makes you feel healthy still. Like I still feel great. I feel better than I have by going through this process because I'm not bloated. I don't overeat. I eat what feels good to my body. I feel like I'm eating what my body wants. Like the other day, my body was like, hey, you know, it sounds really good. Some sauteed zucchini and some cauliflower and some eggs, like scramble it up, put some cheese on top, breakfast of champions. But it's like, when I started this, I was just like, oh my gosh, I'm never going to eat a single vegetable ever again. And it's like, no, like my body was like, hey, go eat some vegetables because this is what sounds good and this is what we need. And it's like, that's the piece I didn't know, is that your body actually knows what it wants. And I think I have the benefit of like seeing this in my son too. Like that's one thing Maria taught me too, is to observe my son. Babies are naturally intuitive eaters before they learn the restrictions and diet culture and all that. Like they're naturally intuitive eaters, and they know when they're full. They know when they're hungry. They know what types of food do they want to eat. So if you put a balanced diet in front of the baby, that's what they're going to eat. And it's so true that it's like we have over time have taught ourselves not to trust ourselves and not to trust our bodies. And by going through this process, I'm seeing that, you know, everyone thinks intuitive eating is you just go eat burgers and fries all day long. And that's so not true. Like your
Yeah.
body knows exactly what it needs to feel good. And I am eating vegetables. I'm still enjoying salads because that's what I like to eat. I like to eat salads, but I'm also enjoying, you know, adding ranch to my chicken, or adding, you know, just avocado to certain things, adding peanut butter to my yogurt, adding, you know, whatever it is. But it's just like food now has flavor to it. I am more satisfied after meals. Like I'm not hungry. I'm not thinking about food throughout the day, or what's my next meal need to be because it has to fit X, Y, and Z portions or things like that. Like intuitive eating is fueling your body appropriately and fueling it with the foods that are going to make it feel good. But there's also foods that make you feel good because they're nutrient dense and they have certain properties that your body needs. But there's also soul food, right? Maria, like we've talked about, like there's food that just makes you feel good because it's tasty. And you know, pizza oftentimes for people has a certain context to it, but we've talked multiple times that there's, you know, fiber in the crust, there's calcium in the cheese, there's protein in the sausage or pepperoni, whatever you put on it. And it's like when you step away and look at it like that, like there's benefits to all types of food to add into your diet. It doesn't have to be an all or nothing approach.
Oof. That's so good. Yeah, that's one thing that I have to work with almost all of my clients on, is getting out of that all or nothing mentality with food. It doesn't have to be either you care the most about nutrition or you don't care at all. Intuitive eating is this beautiful middle ground. Intuitive eating was co-created by two registered dietitians, Evelyn Tribole and Elise Resch. So obviously they care deeply about nutrition. They're super interested in nutrition. But what they know, I mean, they're brilliant women. So what they know through their years of study is nutrition is still just one aspect of health. And it's cool to care about it. But that's not the be all end all when it comes to your health. And there's so much more to that goes into having a truly healthy and sustainable relationship with food.
And if you think about it too, like, yes, dietitians care about nutrition, and nutrition is very important. If you're sticking to your diet Monday through Thursday and, you know, you're restricting and all you're eating is salads, vegetables, like plain chicken, like whatever it is the diet you're following, if you're saying you're falling off the rails on Friday and Saturday and Sunday and overeating, or, you know, just like not fueling your body appropriately at all because you've restricted all of these foods that you could have incorporated into your day-to-day life, that's not nutrition. Like, that's not,
ironic. I know.
You're not doing yourself any favors by doing that.
That's right.
Like, that's the part that I've learned too, is, you know, you can stick to your diet Monday through Friday, and then Saturday comes around and you say, you know, I already fell off the rails, I'm going to just do whatever. And that's what leads to, like, you feeling bloated. That's what leads to you feeling, you know, like your energy is drained and things like that. And it's like, nutrition is important and that's all well and good. But if your nutrition is leading you to, you know, overeating, that's not nutrition. Like, that's a huge reason why you're not able to stick to your diet.
Absolutely. You asked a great question in one of our recent sessions, Cassie, where you were like, I'm not really sure what my end goal was. Like, what was my long-term plan? Like, how did I think this was going to end? Like, sticking to, like, was I going to be on this meal plan for the rest of my life? And I think that's like, I mean, go ahead.
I don't know. Like, that's like the huge piece about it is, like, all of this process is so eye-opening. Like, was I just going to follow this meal plan for the rest of my life? Was I just always going to count my macros? Was I always going to count my calories? Like, was this just like my life now? And when you take a step back and think about it like that, like, I'm 27 years old, so that's a long time to, like, think, you know, say I live until I'm 67, 77, whatever it is, but like that's a really long time to stick to this kind of lifestyle. And
Yes.
when you think about how much time I spend thinking about my meal plans and how certain events are going to fit into my meal plans and how to compensate, and that's exhausting. That's a lot of time over the years.
Yeah.
Like, yeah, I've only been doing like dieting for 4 years, 5 years maybe, but like to continue that into my senior years, like, woof, that's a lot of time.
Cassie, I have clients in their 60s watching this right now who are so jealous of you. They are so jealous of you because they tell me, I wish I had known this years, decades ago. I wish I had had access to this information when I was in my 20s, which is, I mean, I told you, I think on our first call, I was like, it always excites me so much to speak with young women. Because this is something that you are solving now, and you can go the rest of your life not having to diet, not having to follow a meal plan, not having anxiety around food, feeling physically good, and you can model that to your kids. And it's just like there's a lot of grief. I mean, I see people from typically like 20s to 60s, and the older they get, 50s, 60s, the more they're like, there's grief that they didn't have this information sooner, that they modeled disordered eating and dieting to their kids. So I'm happy for you that you won't have to unpack all of that with a therapist when you're in your 60s.
And that's the important part too, is like, we learn from the past. Like, I even have moments too where I think about the events that I might have missed out on, or, you know, a favorite meal that my mom cooked that maybe I missed out on because I was trying to stick to my plan or things like that. And so I totally can empathize with that. And I think we take that and we learn from it. And I would say that is just a lesson learned to us, that we're not going to miss out on those things anymore. And it's just not worth it. Like, and I think we talked about Maria too, like, what was I doing it for, right? Like, did I feel like I had to shrink myself into this, like, body that, you know, people thought that I needed to be, but it was like, what people? Because my son certainly doesn't care. My husband certainly doesn't care. And so who was I doing it for? Strangers in society? Like, that was the part to me that like really hit at home. And it was like, I'm trying to appeal to society, and yet my parents, my friends, my son, my husband, like, they just want me to be happy. They want me to be healthy. They don't care, like, about that stuff. Like, they don't care if, you know, I can use the example of I've had a kid. My body significantly changed since I've had a kid. Like, my body is not what it was, but I found after I had a baby that I was trying to put myself back into the body that I had before I had a baby. And like, that is not the same person anymore. I'm a very different person. My body is significantly different. It went through something huge and traumatic. And let's have some grace with ourselves and realize that I'm a different person now. So let's not try to keep putting myself back to who I was. And even if I was doing that, for what? Because my husband certainly doesn't care. My son doesn't. My parents don't. My friends don't. So I think that's the important piece too, is like, what are you dieting for? Are you dieting for health? Because we've talked about that health is not restriction. Like, that's not the answer. That doesn't make somebody healthy.
Right.
Are you doing it for the aesthetics? Okay, but at the same time, like, I could also say, like, I've seen better aesthetic results from not dieting because I'm not bloated anymore. I'm not restricting certain food groups. I have more variety in my diet. I feel better than I have. So are we doing it for society? Like, strangers in society that I don't necessarily know, don't care about. And so that, like, those are the questions, like, once I started talking through some of those things, like, this process and this journey I've been on becomes a no-brainer. Because once you start telling yourself, what are you dieting for?
Mm-hmm.
I would challenge people, what is the answer to that question
Mm-hmm.
then? Like, what is the answer to it? Why do we diet?
Mm-hmm.
What are your specific end goals?
Mm-hmm.
And like we said earlier, it got to the point where I was just like, what's my long-term goal here? Like,
Mm-hmm.
what was it? I had no idea what my long-term goal was.
Mm-hmm.
Not a clue. I don't know. I was just doing it because I felt like I had to.
Gosh, yeah. You've posed so many good questions today, Cassie. We pursue thinness at what cost, right? That was something that we brought up in the beginning, like at what expense? What is it costing me? What am I sacrificing? And then who is this for? I mean, that is such a good question. Yes, we can acknowledge that we have body privilege and it is safer to exist in a smaller body in our society. Now, if we are dieting to be small and the people who love you just want you to be happy and healthy, then who is this for? And if there are people who would love you less if you were smaller, then one of my favorites, Brie Campos, she's Body Image with Brie on Instagram, she would ask, is that really love? If they would love you less in a smaller body, then is that really love? If they would love you less when you are not happy and healthy, right? Because dieting costs you your health and happiness. Then is that really love?
Right. And I think that plays a lot into just like how you feel about yourself too. Like I've told you before too, that I look in the mirror now and feel more confident about the person that I see in the mirror today than I did before I started this. And it's like, you need to learn to love yourself in the season that you're in.
Mm-hmm.
Everyone's going through something different. Everyone's going through different stages of life. And I think once you come to terms with, dieting isn't going to make you feel better.
Mm-hmm.
Like it's just, you drop 5 pounds. Okay, then what? You're just going to want to drop 5 more. Like you're never going to be satisfied. Like dieting has told us that, you're always going to keep trying to change who you are. And it's like, why are we trying to change who we are? Like you should want to be healthy. And I do. I exercise because I genuinely like to exercise. I do exercises that I genuinely like to do, but I do it because I like the way it makes me feel. That's different than diet culture. And I think those are the things that like we need to pay attention to, is like doing things that make us feel good because they make us feel good, not because it's what diet culture tells us we need to do.
Yeah. And what you're speaking to is like your personal value system and what has like personal meaning to you. And you told me from day one, like you genuinely love to exercise, but health, fitness, nutrition, we are not morally obligated to have an interest in these things. But what I love to help people uncover is like, if this feels of value to you, if this feels important to you, let's really get clear on why, because that's what's going to make it sustainable for you. If you're able to point to like, this matters to me, and it matters to me because it helps me show up for my son or my husband or, whatever it is, helps me feel good physically, then I support you in that. But I just kind of want to clarify that like having an interest in health, fitness, nutrition doesn't make us better people. There's no moral superiority here. If we're interested in that, like that's a hobby kind of, it's like more of like, okay, that's an interest of yours. It's a personal value. And that's great, but I don't think it's fair for us to place judgment on other people if they're not also really interested in that. Because we're not all obligated to pursue health. We don't owe that to anybody. We certainly don't owe thinness to anybody. And, so that's been cool to see in you, Cassie, your personal values.
Yeah. Like it's the same thing. Like if you do not genuinely enjoy exercising, again, that's time that you're taking away from yourself. That's mental capacity that you're taking away from yourself if it's something you don't genuinely enjoy. I exercise because it's my me time. I exercise because I need that time at the beginning of the day, at lunchtime, whatever time I end up getting to it. But like, that's just what I've found works for me. It doesn't work for everyone, and not everyone enjoys it. And that's okay.
Yeah. And it doesn't, for you, fitness is not a chore. It's something that you genuinely look forward to. But for a lot of people, it is a chore, and it doesn't have to be that way. There are so many types of movement that you can reap benefits from, mental and physical benefits from, that a lot of people don't consider because they're like, it doesn't count. And it's like, what if you were to just move your body for the joy of moving your body? And then you'll find that it ends up being sustainable. You end up doing it more often. You end up being consistent with it. So yeah, there's so much there, but I want to be respectful of your time. We've covered so many good things. How has this freedom and flexibility, Cassie, around food, I'm wondering how it has changed your holidays. You had a really successful Thanksgiving. We got to work together at a great time where we were able to like heal a lot of this stuff before the holidays hit. So that is always really exciting for me to enroll people around like September, October, because we can clear this up so that you're like present for the holidays and not worried about the food. But I've seen that in you for sure, that you've had like more flexibility, more confidence, freedom. You're thinking about food less. It's been so easy for you, but can you speak to just like how your holidays have been and will be different now?
Yeah, I think you hit the nail right on the head there, is that you're so much more present when you're not worried about your diet constantly. In the past, I probably would have had to figure out, okay, if I'm having, I have in-laws too. So it's, we do one Thanksgiving with my parents, one Thanksgiving with my husband's parents. We do stuff with our friends, and it's like so many activities happen over the holidays. But in the past, I would have been more focused on how whatever I was eating either A, fit into my meal plan, or B, how I would have had to compensate for it later on. And you miss the enjoyment of just being there and enjoying, your mom's pie, your aunt's casserole that she makes. Like, you miss out on that, but then you also miss out on the memories that you're making with people, because you're making it about what you're eating rather than just being there with your family, enjoying the time, making those memories and making the event about the people that you're around and the memories that you're making, rather than what's on the table or what you're putting into your body. Like, again, when you remove that restriction, when you remove that meal plan mentality, like, it becomes more about the people you're with and the memories you're making than it does the meal. But as for what it does specifically to my plans, I don't have to spend that time thinking about, what am I going to do to compensate, or how am I going to get back on track? And I think that's an important piece, is that there's no more getting back on track. Like, you don't have that mentality anymore, because there's nothing to get back on track to. Like, this is just life. Going to these holiday events is just a part of life now. And like, that's so nice to just be able to look forward to going to our holiday gatherings and not have to worry about how to compensate throughout the day. Just waking up, eating breakfast when I'm hungry, eating lunch when I'm hungry, eating a snack when I'm hungry, showing up to Christmas dinner like it's a normal day. Yes, it might not be a normal day because it's Christmas dinner and family and friends and all that. There's different types of food, but there's not a special aspect to it in that sense. It's just part of life. Attending family events is just a part of your life, and there's so much less anxiety that comes along with it, and they just become more fun. Like, you're just able to be there and enjoy the time with your family. And I think that's the best part, is just there's no diet starts on Monday or starting back over on Monday. And I think that's what leads to people overeating too, is because I gotta get it in now because Monday the diet starts and I have to get back on track. Or there's no getting back on track. Like, it's just like, if you want to make your mom's favorite casserole or pumpkin dish, Maria and I were talking about that over Thanksgiving, that my mom made this so good pumpkin dish. If you want the recipe, let me know. But it's so good. But for me, I would have been like, oh, diet starts on Monday, gotta eat it now while I can, even if I'm not necessarily hungry. But I made the cake again the next week because it was my husband's birthday and that's what he asked for his birthday cake. And so it's just like, you can make these foods at any time. You can eat these foods at any time. And that makes it just so much easier to manage. It's just part of your life now.
Incredible. And I think people think that when you give yourself the permission to eat these foods anytime, that like physically you're going to suffer in some way, but you feel better than ever. And it sounds too good to be true, but I think we have just been brainwashed by diet culture that we need to eat in a certain way in order to look a certain way or to feel a certain way. And it's like, that wasn't working. It doesn't work. And this does. And so I agree with you that at the end of the day, why do we do this? We do this so that your world doesn't revolve around food and you don't have those obsessions anymore, and you can be present for the people and the moments that matter most. We want you to be able to take pleasure in your food, yes, but like it can have its balanced place in your life, and it doesn't have to be obsessive.
The biggest piece is ask your why, and that's the biggest piece, is that I have no idea why I was doing diets, but like I know why I'm doing this, and I can speak to the why. And so if you're not able to answer why and feel good about the reason why, it's probably not the answer.
I know. That's good, Cassie. So is there anything else that you want people to know, or anything we didn't cover today that you wanted to share?
I would just say, if you've ever been thinking about it, just do it, because if you're thinking about it, there's a reason you're thinking about it, and there's a reason why. Again, we're going back to the why. There's a why to why what you're doing right now is not working, and a why for where you want to get. And I can guarantee this is probably what's going to get you there. And it's, for me, like, again, we go back to at what cost. Like, if you've ever been wondering what it is, and committing to yourself to long-term forever freedom, like, at what cost? Okay, so you move on to the next diet and the next diet and the next diet. If you didn't pursue intuitive eating, how much time, how much money, how much mental capacity are you going to spend when you could spend what it is for this to have forever freedom? Like, the value is indescribable. So if you've ever been considering it, I would say that should be reason enough as to why you should look into it.
That's so good. What would you tell yourself, your 6 week ago self, knowing where you are now? What would you tell her?
Oh gosh, I would say that you should have done this sooner. But since I can't go back in time, I would say that, it is gonna work. Like, I can bet a lot of people that watch this are probably like I was, where intuitive eating, again, like I said, sounds very floofy. It sounds very something that somebody just made up, and it's true, somebody did just make it up, but there's so much science behind it. And if you look into the science or you read about the science, like, there's so many benefits, and it's just, the research speaks for itself. But I just tell my old self that it does get better, and you can feel confident about where you're at, and you're going to feel better than you ever have. Because I have so much more energy, and I'm having more fun.
Yeah, you are. I love getting texts from you, like just the excitement of being able to like participate in your life. Like, I'm having a glass of wine and it's no big deal, or like, veggies sound good and also pizza sounds good, and that's awesome. And like, it's been so cool, Cassie, to watch you grow and change and evolve. I am thrilled with where you are now, and it's been such a joy to work with you. So I'm grateful that you gave us your time today. It was so generous of you to give us your time today. If anybody is interested in this process, you're welcome to reach out to me. You can do what Cassie did and apply for a call at my website, mariascrementi.com. The call is just a chance for us to get to know one another. And at the end of the day, if working together isn't the best fit for someone, then I just point you in the best direction for your next step. So there's really nothing to lose. But I think that's it, Cassie. I'm excited for your holiday season to just continue to be joyful and free and fun. I'm excited to keep working with you. Do you have anything else?
No, I mean, if anybody has any questions, you can add me on Facebook, and I'd be glad to tell more about my story if you're interested.
Thank you.
I'm an open book, so whatever questions you have for me on the process or what I've experienced, I'm happy to help.
That's a generous offer. Thank you, Cassie. Well, I adore you. I will see you tomorrow. I'm excited to